I'm going to show you some really good introductions. So I'm not going to take a lot of your time because I want you to work on your own essays and write. But I want you to look up here at the screen and I'm going to show you some nines and how they got in. And another time we'll look at how they got out. But I want to just focus a little mini workshop on getting into a paper. So these are the actual papers, the benchmark papers from the one you wrote. So I scored that actual essay that you wrote about Moses. I scored them that year. So there's my tallies of that year. So I've got them broken down by nines. And what you're going to see is that structure that I told you I don't like because it's so predictable. You're going to see it in several of these nines. But we're going to talk about how that you overcome that. So here is a 9, and this is the way it goes in. In Edward P. Jones' The Known World, the character of Moses is seemingly a paradox, desirous of purity and freedom, but innately tied to nature and the earth. Jones develops this complex characterization through the symbolism of the dirt and of the rain, gustatory, olfactory, and tactile imagery, and of details of nature. Now, just after that introduction, if you were the reader, what would your thoughts be? Well, you can't say, that's going to be a 9, but you can certainly say, this is going to be upper tier. What is that? What is it in that introduction that gives that to you?
For sure.
All right, so they're very specific about the type of imagery, which we need to learn to not just talk about imagery. These are specific types of imagery. That's taste imagery, smell imagery, touch imagery. So we need those. We'll spend some time working up that those specific things. But did you notice that he used that predictable in this title by this author? That doesn't keep you from getting a 9.
No.
But
It's
if
low
you,
level.
yeah. So you can do that, but you've got to almost compensate for that by what follows. All right. Here's another 9. Now, my note on this one is that it has a somewhat pedestrian opening. In his characterization of Moses, Edward P. Jones uses a wealth of vivid, living detail and imagery of nature's fullness of life to present a man who is more earth than man. Moses is a laborer. I think I skipped a word. Moses is a laborer who works for the land daily and thus has a deep and close connection to it. Jones's language of relationship and life in association with the land and the nature around Moses reveals Moses as a man whose life, joy, suffering, and death all spring from the earth, and his response to this wellspring of life is to return his own labors and love to the earth. Now, why did I put this note that it's a somewhat pedestrian opening? What did you feel after that opening? What impression did it leave you with? It was what, Angela?
It was like the end, but that's how I would wrap that up.
It felt more like a conclusion?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a conclusion.
Is there a word that you would use to describe that other than pedestrian? Do you know what is meant by pedestrian?
Basic.
Sort of mundane, sort of plain. It doesn't sing. Now, this is not a singing 9.
Feels like I don't want to read the rest.
Yeah.
I don't know, personally.
The word that comes to my mind is dense.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Too much.
It feels heavy. So a really strong opening. This writer clearly writes her way up to a 9, despite that heavy beginning. So you want to find a good balance between loading it with enough stuff that your reader knows you have the the ideas and the direction that the prompt is asking you to have with the necessity to just get in and start writing. So you've got to load it with some, depending on what the prompt has. But this one's just loaded too much. And it was like, it's surprising that this writer was able, after writing such a heavy beginning, to have the time to write such a stellar rest of the paper. There's another 9. Over there.
Girl.
In The Known World by Edward P. Jones, Moses is an adult slave who works the fields for his master. This passage describes the night of his master's death, although it focuses on Moses rather than his master. In the passage, the reader is able to follow Moses in his nightly routine after hours of work, a time that he spends away from any other humans and in the presence of nature. Through the use of imagery, personification, and nature, the author reveals Moses to be a man who is more connected with nature than with the rest of humanity, and is truly happy when he is one with the natural world.
This was a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't like impressive.
They used it.
Repetition of nature was like kind of joke.
The
Could say
end,
the earth.
she ended
Yeah,
it well.
there's
Yeah, the end was good.
but
Yes.
Like,
Nightly-
See?
nightly
It was so
routine,
unnecessary,
nightly
like,
routine,
yeah.
the middle
Yeah.
of it.
So, can you tell that this is actually a naturally good writer who did not do any pre-writing and is thinking her way through this introduction?
oh yeah.
And can you see that? You can almost follow the thought and see it revealing.
It doesn't flow.
Right. So she's just thinking here. The light bulb goes on right about here. So as a reader, I can tell that. So I'm at this point thinking, okay, the light bulb's going off. Now let's see what follows. What I would prefer is some pre-writing so that your light bulb can start from the very beginning. And it's clear that this is a good enough writer that she's not accustomed to having to do any thinking ahead and planning ahead and pre-writing. She just starts writing and it just comes. And she's lucky that we read the whole thing and don't make too many judgments there. An 8. In his book, The Known World, Jones describes a plantation and the slave life on it. Specifically, he details and characterizes Moses, a slave, with very different values and attitudes than those of the other slaves. Rather than embracing family life like the other slaves, Moses develops a nearly, I'm not sure if that's nearly or not, personal connection with nature as a way of, can you tell what do you think it is? Really? Yeah, there you go. A really personal connection with nature as a way of coping with slavery and perhaps only temporarily feeling free. See, shades of the same kind of thing happening here. See, this light bulb of feeling free. When you're in nature, you're free, as opposed to being a slave. When you go back to the cabins with your family, you're still a slave. When you're out in the woods, in nature,
You're a person.
you're free. You are at one with nature. Do you see how the shackles and the bonds fall off along with those clothes? And he becomes that. But this student is writing her way to that thought. Let's look at the lower end. This is a 3. In Edward P. Jones' novel of The Known World. Are you already tired of that structure? All right, how about if you read 1,175 of these essays and 900 of them start that way? That's why I say to you, please, I'm begging you, please give us something else. There are alternatives. Moses is one of the slaves that work for 15 hours a day. The author reveals the character of Moses by describing his work experience, how hard he works, and what he does after work. Through this, the readers are able to make out what kind of person Moses is. Edward P. Jones' use of imagery and selection of detail further emphasize the personality and feelings of Moses. it's not particularly bad in its structure, but does it really say anything? Do I really know that this writer has any idea of what Moses' personality and has been revealed? No. I need to know as the reader that you've got it, and you get it through that pre-writing. I know you want to see a really bad one. This is a 2, and this is all. This is the whole thing.
Wow.
The author uses predominantly imagery when revealing the character of Moses. The author, with transcendentalistic details.
Oh, that should be on the list.
Yes, it should be on my list. It was not one I read. This is our benchmark set. Portrayed Moses to be one with nature. Edward P. Jones' first connection to nature was the mule and Moses. The mule followed Moses everywhere he went, and Moses treated him with naturement. Jones's second connection with nature was the soil in exchange as food. Moses sent everyone home to rest and eat. Instead of going home to eat a meal, he chose to eat dirt as if it was a spot of cornbread.
They tried so hard. They tried.
Yeah. I will tell you that was the most entertaining thing about reading this particular one is all the different reasons that students gave for why Moses ate that dirt. Yes. And then a 1, when you see on the rubric unacceptably brief, that's it. A 0 is if there's writing there, but it doesn't have anything to do with the essay.
What is it usually about?
Oh, it could be lyrics to a Taylor Swift song. It could be,
It's like the weirdest thing you've gotten on it.
lots of students they don't want their friends to think they're not writing an essay. So they will write. But they will be very honest about that. I don't want anyone to know that I am not writing this essay, so I will tell you about my weekend. There's this girl, and and they'll go on for 3 pages about, and then I had several of them this last year that said, I would like to write this essay, but the girl that I've been wanting to go out with all year long is sitting right across from me, and I just cannot concentrate for staring at her, and just going on and on. I mean, so that's like if you just mentioned the work, I could give you a 1. As it is, I'm going to have to give you a 0. So, all right. So those are some interesting openings, and I think I have a note of one that I scored that I said was excellent. Those I showed you. This is a fun one at this point, right in the middle of a paragraph. Can you see that? At this point, I'm not sure what else to say. Thank you very much for reading. You can see imagery really is important in the poem, and I'm sure you know why. And then there's this one. This is an opening line. Blood is thicker than water, but yet not so complicated to wrap your finger around. It's why I wrote it down. Yeah. Yes. All right. So my point is, you really need to just use what's there, the prompt. All we want to know is that you got it. You know where you're going. Focus your major attention on the content of the essay. And if you are so stuck that you can't start, skip it. Skip down half a page and start writing what you know. Go back when you're finished and put the introduction on top of it. Because at that point you'll know where you went. And you can write maybe even a better introduction there. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it. All right, so you have 2 things to write. The awakening essay and then your revision for this time writing. So hopefully maybe you got some ideas even in that little brief discussion and looking at some of those. Call me over if you have questions about, you want me to look at something, you want to run something by me, you're stuck on something and need some help. The assignment for the revision is already on Turnitin, And so that's where you will type that and put that in there. That will count on the second 9 weeks, as will the Awakening essay. All of your grades, with the exception of one, are in, which is the reflection on this essay I forgot about. And so I'm going to put those in while you are doing this. But that's a minor grade. That shouldn't change your average too much. Please make sure that you look at PowerSchool, and if you don't have access to PowerSchool, come up here and let me show you what's going on. And let's make sure we have everything that we need to have. Do you have any questions before you start? Everybody has your work and you know what you need to do.
Do you have a reflection?
You should have submitted it to turn it in. If you hadn't already submitted it, it's probably too late.
I was wondering if you could like have any examples of how people started with quotes, or like, cause
How to start with a quote?
yes, or like what would be, cause like a lot of those 9s you said like they got better as they went on, but like all the beginnings are kind of like the same.
Yeah.
So is there like, do you have a suggestion for how to?
I would say if you're going to start with a quote, start the quote from the work you're using, that you're writing about. Don't start with a quote, an isolated quote that
Right.
you remember from another work or a famous person. And then don't make it as a quote with a follow-up of something along the lines of this shows that.
Right.
A powerful quote beginning, just writing one off the top of my head would be tough, but a powerful quote to start on this particular essay might, if you can find something that is just a very profound statement that Moses
Yeah.
did, and then you follow that with Edward P. Jones reveals the astonishing character of Moses.
Okay.
You know, so and so, whatever. But yeah, you can absolutely start with a quote. It's difficult, but let me read yours and I'll see if I can give you some more specific feedback on that. Any other questions? All right, get busy.
This chapter,
Huh?
like, I thought that this rewrite was due this, like, past Monday for some reason. So, like, I, like, went ahead and did it, but, like, there's still some improvements that I can make now that I'm looking at it. Is there a way to, like, resubmit it?
Yeah, I think that it's set to resubmit as many times as you want.
Oh, okay, then I'll do it.
I think so. Try it, like, just take another document and submit it on top of that. And if it doesn't let you do it, let me know so I can go into the settings and change it.
Is this supposed to still be recorded?
Yeah, just leave it on.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I don't really know how to do it, but I don't want to use the in.
All right, I think that's a really good quote.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a good one to use because what you're really saying here
like a connection
is
thing.
you're mastering the connection.
Yes, ma'am.
But what you haven't done is reflect the prompt.
Okay.
So I need more of the reflection of the prompt. I need his whole name and if this is see, what I mean by you haven't reflected the whole prompt is you haven't told me through what
Through
because
what?
the
Okay.
prompt asks you
How? Okay.
and so that's got to be in there too. Jones reveals Moses. You know, if what you are using this quote for is to express this particular type of imagery, this particular type of diction, this particular type of whatever, then that needs to be as part of this sentence. Through the use of whatever
Edward.
as not as seen in this quote, but Jones reveals Moses, but it's got the rest of the prompt's got to be in there
Okay.
somewhere. But yeah, I think you definitely can stick with that one.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
What do I do if I want to add this? Do I just take it
Yes.
and put it in?
Well, I've pulled everything out of the box by now, so I need to put it in a. Well, go ahead and put it in there, and I'll clean it out of anything that comes in later.
Okay.